Well, I hope that really tickled your curiosity. Now you just want to learn so much more about everybody and everything. Because next we are going to be welcoming our guest speaker, Becky Salzman, up. Becky, just to tell you a little bit about her, she's a chief curiosity seeker, an assumption buster, and a curiosity consultant. I do hope we get to learn more about that. Salzman holds a master's degree in behavioral science from Washington University in St. Louis and has spent over 2 decades studying curiosity and the role it plays in decision making, idea generation, adventure, sales, and lifestyle design. She is the creator of the Living Curiously method and author of 2 books, Living Curiously, How to Use Curiosity to Be Remarkable and Do Good Stuff, and Arousing the Bi-Curious, Real Estate Pillow Talk for Patrons and Professionals. She welcomes you to join the tribe of the curious. So thank you. Give it up for Becky.
Hi, good morning. About the same time that I was wrapping up a bunch of research, review of literature, and what had become thousands of interviews and interactions for my Living Curiously project and book, Colorado announced the legalization of recreational marijuana. And one of my interviewees, a guy named Shaggy, had been in the cannabis industry for decades, since he owned a head shop since he was 17. And he and his friend, employee, sidekick, hilarious sidekick Curly, had been invited to, Shaggy, you know Shaggy? Had been invited to, no? Had been invited to what was billed as the largest functional glass expo in the world in Denver. So he called me shortly after the announcement and he said, "Girl, we can get in. I can get you in VIP. Do you want to join me in Denver?" And I said what I normally say when offered an opportunity to have an adventure. I said, "Yeah, sure." So this is how we ended up, the 3 of us, in Denver at the largest functional glass expo in the world. Functional glass is not your grandmother's bong. They are beautiful works of art made of borosilicate glass from which you can smoke. So as we were touring the show floor, these are some of the kinds of things that we saw. And if any of you have not logged on to Pokemon Go, this should inspire you. Remote control, fully functional, all glass. After a couple of days of touring the show floor, we decided to rent a car because we wanted to get out and explore what was happening in Denver specifically as this industry was emerging from behind the shadows onto Main Street and heading rapidly toward Wall Street. So we went out, we rented a car, I drove, Curly was in the back, Shaggy was in the passenger seat, and we drove out to see dispensaries to see how they were handling the medical recreational kind of situation. We went to see glass galleries where pieces like this were being sold for tens of thousands of dollars. We went to see some head shops so we could see what the competition was up to. And we went to some flame-offs, which are these rave-like environments with dark, pulsating music, steam, whatever, where at center stage, these pipe makers are competing with molten glass to build these beautiful pieces. So here are some pictures from one of the flame-offs. As we were driving down the freeway, I'm driving, Shaggy, like I said, is in the passenger seat, and a train starts kind of coming along beside us. And I, just along beside is, the train tracks. And all of a sudden, Curly from the back seat starts getting really, really agitated and pointing out the window to the train saying, "That's my stuff! That's my stuff!" I didn't know what he was talking about. I looked over at Shaggy. Shaggy seemed perplexed. And Curly proceeded to explain to us that in the years before Shaggy helped him become a legitimate businessman, he had been homeless for a number of years. And he and his girlfriend, who worked full-time at a Fortune 500 company, had lived in an abandoned railroad car behind an assisted living facility for over a year. And he explained that one day, when they left, his girlfriend going to her job and Curly going to whatever he did during the day, they came back in the evening and it was dark and it was raining, and as they approached the railroad track, it was apparent that sometime after years of sitting abandoned, the engine had come up, some engine had come up, hooked up to the train, and had taken the railroad car and every single thing that they owned away. So driving down the street several years later and several states away, Curly was convinced that that was the railroad car. And I'm driving, and it's not a cartoon where I can just like pull over and jump the train. I didn't know what to do, and I'm looking out the windshield, and I see that the freeway goes this way, and the train tracks go that way, and I see the train disappear behind the trees. When I get home from Denver, I had all these little stories to tell, and I was telling friends and people about the stories, and this was a simple story that I shared. And the response to the story was what was most interesting to me from a point of curiosity, because everyone with whom I shared the story had the same reaction. Actually, everyone with whom I shared the story had the same question, or a variation of the same question, and only that one question, which was it his stuff, right? Or a variation of that question, was it his stuff? And that was really all anyone ever asked, except for one person that I shared the story with that had a totally different question and had a whole different set of questions, many of which I had never considered. But it was kind of not surprising because her job was creative advocacy and policymaking for issues around homelessness. So she had questions like, what was his stuff? What was the significance of being behind an assisted living facility in terms of services? What does one need to live in an abandoned railroad car and work full-time, and how does that happen? So all of these questions. If you look at the research and literature on curiosity, one of the best measures of curiosity are the quantity and quality of questions. So by any measure, her level of curiosity was certainly higher than all the other people with whom I shared the story. And I started thinking about that in terms of familiarity and its role in curiosity. So now I'm going to do something a little annoying. I'm going to set this story aside, and I'm going to promise to come back to it. Because what I want to do is pull back the curtain on some habits that often masquerade as curiosity, but are in fact curiosity killers. And these habits obscure our ability to use the one tool we have to uncover blind spots, make connections, decrease divisiveness, and live more insightful, fulfilling, and adventurous lives. And that tool is curiosity. But not any kind of curiosity, because the review of literature and the study of curiosity shows that there are probably two distinct kinds of curiosity that we talk about when we talk about curiosity. Free-range curiosity and applied curiosity. So free-range curiosity is what we talk about a lot when we're talking about the wonder of childhood curiosity. What's that, this starry wonder? Applied curiosity is the strategic use of curiosity to uncover blind spots, find hidden connections, and live more insightfully and adventurously. And it seems that these habits that I'm going to share really wreak havoc with applied curiosity. As an analogy between free range and applied curiosity, you might use, in the science analogy, you might look at basic science and applied science. So a basic scientist might study the molecular structure of cells in order to advance their understanding of the molecular structure of cells, whereas an applied scientist might study the molecular structure of cells to come up with better chemotherapy protocols or something, but are very specific. And when I'm talking about applied curiosity, when I'm talking about curiosity and the need to have it elevated more now than ever before, I'm talking about primarily applied curiosity. These habits are very interesting and devious because the first habit hides within something that we are using increasingly to help us make sense of the world. This habit hides in story. And increasingly, story is how we are making sense of this data deluge, this information overload, this access to and bombardment from information and data that like never before. Now, story also used to be big at the time where we didn't have a lot of information and we used story to make sense of the world, i.e. the development and writing of the Bible, stories like that. But increasingly we're using stories, and we may even be in what is called a story bubble. When you look at the number, there was a study that came out, the number of people with their LinkedIn profiles that had storyteller as, or some version thereof, in their LinkedIn profile. It was more than the entire population of Boston, Massachusetts. I mean, every day someone's cropping up, and nothing wrong with it, as a storyteller, a story seller, a story consultant. And we love these stories. We love a TED Talk when it provides us with this deep, enriched meaning, and then it provides us with something very fulfilling, and that is a tiny, tidy takeaway. And storytellers are evaluated by how well they provide us with this tiny, tidy takeaway. It's very, very helpful for us to have all of these things swarming about, especially with all of these kind of scary things swarming about, and have us handed a tiny, tidy takeaway. But there's a problem. There's a dangerous downside to tiny, tidy takeaways. And that is, takeaways eliminate the information gap that is necessary for strategic curiosity to thrive. And if we become so addicted to these takeaways being provided by someone else or us, it doesn't allow us to flex the curiosity muscle to explore that information gap. And that's fine, except for when these tiny, tidy takeaways obscure a greater truth. This habit is kind of exacerbated, or the problem with this habit is kind of exacerbated by another set of habits. And those habits are our cognitive biases that we as human brain recipients and owners of we all do. We all have these biases. And these are little shortcuts that we take to make decisions. Simplified shortcuts. And sometimes we need to do these when we're acting fast, and sometimes they are very distracting and also mislead us. One of the biggest is the confirmation bias. And the confirmation bias is the tendency that we all have to believe and value evidence that supports what we already believe and discount evidence that does not. And that makes sense. We don't want to hang around with a bunch of people that tell us that we're wrong. It's annoying. So our friends become somewhat silos of sameness. And it's hard to cross-pollinate because talking to people that disagree with us becomes kind of like being with disagreeable people. We are somewhat losing the distinction between disagreeing and disagreeable. And that is playing out in our virtual world as well. When we unfriend people that disagree with us, that silo of sameness narrows even further. It's a lot nicer to look at your newsfeed and not see really annoying people who are providing evidence that we know is wrong. But it also narrows our point of view, and it is a curiosity killer. Now, the other thing is that Facebook does it for us. So not only are we kind of creatures of cognitive bias and confirmation bias, but if we don't like a particular thing on our newsfeed or we don't engage with it, the good news is that we don't see it as much. So we begin to see the world in these silos of sameness. We begin to see the world as people just like us. And again, that's okay until you're handed a tiny, tiny takeaway from people just like us that obscures a greater truth. And we fail to have the ability to flex our curiosity muscles to avoid being blindsided. And this is the difference between strategic curiosity or applied curiosity, right, and free-range curiosity. It's a distinction. But there's good news, so I'm not being all negative. Turns out that knowledge of these habits reduce their toxicity. It reduces the habit's ability to wreak havoc with our curiosity. So we're already better now. We're already good. We're already more curious. We're already living more curiously. But it was this thought. Here are our silos of sameness. It was. I'm skipping to this so you can look at this. I really didn't need to click this, but it was my thought one night as I was thinking about how we elevate curiosity. The foundation of living curiously is simple. It's this reordering mechanism. It's this mechanism by which we elevate curiosity ahead of criticism, judgment, fear, and complacency. But just telling people to elevate curiosity where it helps, how do we do it? How do we get more curious, especially when we are faced with things that may make us feel wrong? And one night it's about midnight, and I hit send on the manuscript for Living Curiously, and I was standing at my desk, and it was just piles of, little scratch notes, chicken notes, research that I had printed out, periodicals, books, and I wanted to figure out, was there some kind of framework? Was there something that was rooted in the literature and the research that could be used to pique, P-I-Q-U-E, pique, P-E-A-K, curiosity? And I was drawing, and at one point, like at 2 a.m., I finally drew this. And I kept matching it with the research and matching it with what I had seen. And I realized that this may be a helpful framework for dialing up and down along the curiosity continuum to not only achieve peak curiosity in ourselves, but to perhaps inspire peak curiosity in others as educators or in any kind of interaction where we need to dial up or down our curiosity. So I'll describe this a little bit, which is if curiosity is on the y-axis, the two things that are related but not necessarily related are familiarity and, it's kind of a mouthful, but deviation from expected outcome. So I'll explain. When you're in the corner here, no curiosity, no familiarity. It doesn't take a lot of research to know that you can't be curious about something that you don't even know exists, right? I mean, familiarity, when you're not even at all aware of something, is going to result in no curiosity. But it seems to be that an optimal, a Goldilocks level of familiarity can actually pique curiosity. On the other end of the spectrum, being so familiar with something is not conducive to pique curiosity. So if you're a CPA, for example, and you have been doing it for 15 years, and you're very familiar with being a CPA, there's not really a huge incentive to be kind of out in public saying, I'm not that familiar with being a CPA. I mean, no one's going to hire you. So we become kind of immune to coming out as being unfamiliar. But that means that in the private, you can, if you are very familiar with something, infuse some unfamiliarity into your endeavor. So for example, in the CPA example, you could look for new ways or someone else or some other industry that might give you insight into how you can look at doing your business differently. And in the creative field, that's probably even easier. Not that CPAs aren't creative, but creative accountants are not something that most people like to hire. But that is how you adjust your familiarity, and by tuning that up and down, you can actually achieve peak curiosity. The other deviation from expected outcome is you focus really on the expected. So the element that can adjust expected is uncertainty. Uncertainty can be infused into your expectation to rotate that up or down. And I'll explain. Simple example, let's say you are studying for a test, and everything you know tells you that if you study this much, you eat this for breakfast, you get this much sleep, drink lots of water, no cocktails the night before, whatever, you're going to score an A on that test. That's your expectation. And it's a pretty high expectation with very little uncertainty. You get an A on that test. So that's not a big deviation from expected outcome. There wouldn't be any reason to be particularly curious. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you do all of those things and you get an F on the test. That's a big deviation from expected outcome. You might think, well, I would be curious, but not really. Because what happens then is we tend to de-elevate curiosity and elevate criticism, judgment. Man, that test, that teacher is just, the professor just made, whatever. Fear, what if it means I'm lame and I just can't do this? Or complacency, self-handicapping. Very, very common in literature. So that deviation from expected outcome is wide. But let's say you get a B, and that is kind of the optimal, again, Goldilocks level of curiosity, because you're thinking, I did all these things, I was close, so it was a slight deviation from expected outcome. And the way you can manipulate that, because sometimes you think we expect what we expect, but the way you can manipulate that is injecting uncertainty. So I was really, really excited. Oops, I skipped ahead. There we are. There I am, being very excited. I was very excited because I realized that to live curiously is to uncover blind spots, discover hidden connections, reduce divisiveness. It's not in the sense of living curiously just wondering about the stars, which is glorious free-range curiosity. It's not just being less judgmental. It is actually being more accurate in your judgments. And that might be even a loftier goal. So between understanding habits that are curiosity killers and being able to pique curiosity, I'm going to bring back that story. Now you have the tools, right? You have how to pique curiosity, and you have how to avoid these habits. And I'll just tell you the rest of the story and see what your curiosity does, right? So, as I said, the train is going this way and the highway is going this way, and I'm looking out the windshield thinking, uh-oh, and the train disappears behind the trees. And I didn't know what to do, and all of a sudden Curly in the back is kind of calming down. And I thought, well, did he pick up that vape pen? Because it was really kind of mellow. And a whole minute, he hadn't. The whole minute went by, and it was just quiet in the car, just quiet, which is weird for the three of us, because And I hear this sigh, and I look in the rearview mirror, and Curly says this: "That's okay. It's all better now." That's an example of an untidy takeaway. Let your curiosity go wild. Thank you.
Give a plug for Becky. These books right here, Living Curiously, How to Use Curiosity to Be Remarkable and Do Good Stuff, these are on sale in the back corner. So if you would like to go grab one after this, $5 will go towards Sunday Assembly, $5 from the proceeds of each book. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right.
And also, I'll advance one more and just say, if you're interested, if you're a curiosity seeker and just want to join the tribe of the curious, it's kind of fun. We have a quick Curiosity Monday that comes out. It's free. It's fun. You can check it out at livingcuriously.net.
All right. Thank you, Becky.